Hey there. Thanks for checking out my channel and watching this video, and I hope you enjoy it. Might not be your speed, but I'm sure there's people out there that enjoy stuff like this, so that's why I throw it up. Today I'll be reading my essay that I wrote for my philosophy class. It's a little bit dense, um, but for those who like that kind of stuff, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. So this essay is about, well, I'll read the title and then I'll talk about that. The title is Scale Dependence, What Thermodynamics, the Coastline Paradox, and Games Tell Us About Love and Sexuality in a Boundless Universe. And from that, you can pretty much gather what it's about. I was kind of thinking about, like, what is the point of the whole thing? The grand scheme. And so I kind of wrote this essay to kind of figure out just that. So without further ado, I'll jump in. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. Albert Einstein. It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Aristotle. What do we know for certain? Not only in our own lives, not only in our own observable universe, not only in the broadest possible understanding of existence itself, but in anything, anywhere that was, is, or will ever be everything. This question drives to the heart of a debate that has silently humbled inquisitive minds for millennia. While some have argued that love is the only answer to every question, is that just sophistry? Or is there something to that? Assuming that there is no end to material and energetic existence, what is the point of recreating? What is the point of falling in love? Assuming that there is an end to everything, what still is the point? An argument can be made that love in a cosmos with unclear teleology provides a microcosm of increasingly useful and pleasurable mutual validation, existential continuity, and coherence in an ocean of seemingly meaningless, random, or infinite space and time. Love is a form of scaleless symbiosis. It is the heightened, unified dynamic of sophisticated, homophilic objects. By experience, we can relatively say that there are instances of love among human beings, but those beings are not wholly and exclusively human. They are, in a phrase, not categorical absolutes. They can be reduced to organs, to tissues, to cells, to molecules, elements, particles, subatomic particles, strings, and whatever lies deeper to be found. And string theory tells us that much like quantum entanglement, or spooky action at a distance, or general relativity via space curvature, all matter is connected across space and time to some degree. So when two people experience love, can it not also be said that their atoms experience love? Is not the universe itself, because we are a piece of it and inextricably connected to it, experiencing love? The borders that divide the universe in scale, space, and time are not hard. We can see that love is a critical mass phenomenon. It acts much like quantum effects, where coherence of particles cannot be observed for more than fractions of a second, even in empty space, at above Planck-length scale. So too does the phenomenon of love not look the same at scales below groups of people, or at least one person. That is to say, we can observe phenomenon of love in the brain generally, but we cannot say that this or that neuron is in love, just that it connects or at least is affected by love. Love is relative in intensity, in form, and in the beings who feel it. Love is scaleless symbiosis of beings with scale-dependent features. This will be an important description. Sex is the symbol of life in a single act. The Oxford English Dictionary defines sex as the physical contact between individuals involving sexual stimulation, sexual activity, or behavior, specifically sexual intercourse or copulation. Sex is one of the most fundamental behaviors in existence. Precisely because sex in its various expressions is the act by which complex adaptive systems recreate existence. Genetic recombination. Not only is sex associated with life, it is also associated with death. La petite mort is a French phrase translating to the little death, which is the feeling that ensues right after orgasm. And there is research that shows that DMT, a molecule which is released in great quantities during death, is also released after orgasm. Thus, we can see that sex, life, and its final stage, death, are at least chemically connected. An article published in 2017 titled Brain Activity Unique to Orgasm in Women, an fMRI analysis, shows that pain tolerance goes up remarkably in females during orgasm, along with a peaking of activity across the brain, including the reward centers, demonstrating that there is an evolutionary preference, or at least an adaptation, towards enjoying moderately painful sexual encounters, even accounting for the statistically rare inability to orgasm during penetrative sex. This is like life in general. Breakdown in muscles or neurons which induce hypertrophy have been wired into our brains over millions of years to feel pleasurable. Because healthy eustress via sex and physical activity prevents the explosive entropy or constant erosions due to distress or eustress, also known as apathy. Thus, sex does not necessarily have to be completely divorced or completely married to love to have existential importance. It can also by itself connect us to life and death, and teach us about the pleasures of pain and the pain of pleasure, and their utility. But sex does tend to go with loving feelings. This same study pointed out that prefrontal cortex activity was most active during the phase of steepest penile detumescence, after sexual stimulation had ceased, meaning that sexual partners identified with one another and their concept of self heavily after sex, a bond usually reserved for amorous or very close partners. Death, love, sex, life, partner. It seems like these things are strongly tied together. It might be rational to make the conclusion that sex might be the highest physical analog for love, even when it can happen without it, as well as a good analog for life, even when in today's world more sex is had for fun than procreation. Next section. Life can be seen as an infinite game. In a grand-looking book titled Our Mathematical Universe, My Quest for the Ultimate Nature of Reality, by MIT physics professor Max Tegmark, Tegmark looks at the underpinnings for potential infinity. Quote, inflation is a leading theory for our cosmic origins because it has passed observational tests, and parallel universes seem to be a non-optional part of the package. Inflation converts potentiality into reality, if mathematical equations are governing. He conjectures elsewhere, why do we perceive the world as stable and ourselves as local and unique? Here is my guess, because it is useful. So our universe may be infinite, but as with everything, there are those who disagree. Quote, results indicate universe is not a fractal, does transition to homogeneity. Physicist Morag Scrimgeour wrote in a presentation following his study, The Wiggle-Z Dark Energy Survey, the transition to large-scale cosmic homogeneity. His study of microwave radiation of a large scale of the universe sought to disprove the fractal universe hypothesis, which may be considered under the umbrella of the infinite universe concept. He went on to state that the clustering of mass found strong consistency with a FRW-based ACDM model, one that models dark energies shaping our universe's matter. My response to this cluster density and scale study would be to put it in the context with a variant of what you see is all there is. That variant would be found in the coastline paradox, or what I would refer to as how you see is all there is, which represents a phenomena described by popular mechanics as the length of a coastline being completely dependent on what size of measurement you use to study it. If you use a ruler to measure, you would get a vastly larger length of coastline than if you measured in miles. Like love, measurements change with granularity and scale. Implicit in his own study, Scrimgeour recognizes that matter that is invisible, dark matter, which has effects on our own universe, but its presence is not largely apparent, and which some physicists have speculated is the perturbation of another universe into ours, what Tegmark refers to as a parallel universe. Thus, if Scrimgeour corrects for matter outside our universe, which may have a shape and expanse which implies a fractal clustering, he may be inadvertently showing that the broader universe is in complete congruence with a potentially fractal model, while still thinking he had shown that the universe is limited in size and scale, stable, as Tegmark put it. If he has taken different measurement scales, and taken the parallel matter into serious account, it's possible Scrimgeour might have come to a different conclusion. Next section. Infinite games, like life, may still have strategies. In my research for this essay, I came across a pop psychology book published in 2019 titled The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, and a 1986 book it was based on called Finite and Infinite Games by James P. Carse. Each book argued that life should be understood as an infinite game. Carse states that finite games are those instrumental activities, from sports to wars, in which the participants obey rules, recognize boundaries, and announce winners and losers. The infinite game, there is only one, includes any authentic interaction from touching to culture that changes rules, plays with boundaries, and exists solely for the purpose of continuing the game. A finite player seeks power. The infinite one displays self-sufficient strength. Finite games are theatrical, necessitating an audience. Infinite ones are dramatic, involving participants. Sinek boils down the strategy to 5 points: that infinite players should seek just cause, courageous leadership, vulnerable team, worthy adversary, and open playbook. That your cause should be just, that you have the courage to lead towards it, that your team is healthy on the way, that your opposition is respected, and that your playbook is open, possibly referring to Karl Popper's The Open Society and Its Enemies. Why have these strategies if the end is unclear, or you reject an end altogether? Because, as Tegmark says, it is useful. Thus, Sinek is arguing for a disciplined, personal reality, one with arbitrary but personally valid justifications. In short, create a finite game, a microcosm, within an infinite game, the cosmos. Life began as a membrane, again, a finite game, within a vast ocean of infinite randomness. Jeremy England has mathematically theorized that life is a dissipation-driven adaptive system, that inorganic matter has cooperated into organic unity to pull heat out of the environment faster. In his 2013 article, Statistical Physics of Self-Replication, he gives a novel formula for heat production based on bacterial reproduction and explains with a formula and says the following: this relation demonstrates that the heat evolved in the course of the cell making a copy of itself is set not only by the decrease in entropy required to arrange molecular components of the surrounding medium into a new organism, but also by how rapidly this takes place through the division time, and by how long we have to wait for the newly assembled structure to start falling apart through Tmax. And earlier in his article, he points out, thus, in a competition among self-replicators to dominate the population of the future, one strategy for success is to be simpler in construction and more prone to spontaneous degradation. Of course, in the limit where two self-replicators differ dramatically in their internal entropy or durability, as with a virus and a rabbit, the basis for comparison in terms of Darwinian fitness becomes too weak. Nevertheless, in a race between competitors of similar form and construction, it is worthwhile to note that one strategy for reducing the minimal metabolic costs of growth for a replicator is to substitute in new components that are likely to wear out sooner. The proposition of compartmentalizing for the sake of greater fitness might have direct bearing on the importance of love, where degradation of one thing we are attracted to in our partner does not jeopardize our organic cooperation. I previously defined love as a scaleless symbiosis, the heightened unified dynamic of sophisticated homophilic objects. Love is sex of the mind, the soul, the body, to the extent that any of those have real meaning. Love is the recombination of sophisticated beings. And to the extent that biological things should be made simpler, the Kolmogorov complexity is the length of the shortest computer program that can reproduce an algorithmic object as an output. Its complexity rating directly proportionate to the thermodynamic entropy of that object. This is important because as evolution continues and speeds up, according to the 10,000-year explosion, biological complexity will increase in order to, as England describes it, increase heat dissipation, whatever implication that might have for environmentalists. England concludes the aforementioned 2013 article by stating, whatever the scheme, however, the resulting stochastic population dynamics must obey the same general relationship entwining heat, organization, and durability. In a Quantum magazine article entitled A New Thermodynamics Theory of the Origin of Life, the author adds onto England's confirmation of the thermodynamically predicted bacterial replication rate, saying scientists have already observed self-replication in non-living systems. According to new research led by Philip Marcus of the University of California, Berkeley, and reported in Physical Review Letters in August, vortices in turbulent fluids spontaneously replicate themselves by drawing energy from shear in the surrounding fluid. Organic mate selection is about seeking optimal homophily, mates close enough to you that are similar, but not so close that your genes mutate due to high levels of recessive characteristics. This self-replication is built into our universe, and it is a drive that pulls very strongly on us. Similar, well-meaning players seeking a similar shared game. This is love. This is, according to the research article, The Deeper the Love, the Deeper the Hate, which states, the present study investigated whether similarity within romantic partners was associated with greater feelings of love in the absence of betrayal, and a greater hate induced in the presence of betrayal by using vignettes to induce love and hate in a sample of 59 young adults. The results showed that people who shared similar values and interests with the target persons were more likely to experience stronger love. Additionally, stronger feelings of love were associated with greater hate after the relationship was broken, suggesting a link between romantic love and hate. The more similar you are to your partner, the deeper the love you tend to experience when things go well, and the deeper the hate you experience when infidelity occurs. Noam Spencer, in a Psychology Today article, Why Do We Have Sex?, writes about what sex means to those who engage in it. As was shown above, we seek optimally similar partners and experience deeper love with them. Below, it will be reasoned by Spencer, based on his readings of Randall Collins, the great American sociologist, that sex is a similarly minded activity in the context of a similarly socially constructed understanding. Quote, in this context, sex is an interactive ritual, and it follows the rules. In a sexual encounter, a small group gathers, usually two, no more. Participants are aware of the presence of the other. No one ever tells you in the middle of intercourse, wow, I just noticed you're here. And their intention is directed to the common interest. They make love. Participants share a powerful emotion, in this case sexual arousal, and construct a clear definition of us and them. Us are in here having sex, and them, poor slobs, are outside. They should not watch us, interrupt us, or even know all the particulars about that we're doing. The idea that sex is good for us seems natural, but there is a strong evidentiary basis for it as well. According to the article, sexual experiences promotes adult neurogenesis in the hippocampus despite an initial elevation in stress hormones. There is a marked difference between the ability of rats to run mazes and remember information after a month and a half of sex compared to unsexed rats. 14 days of sexual experience enhanced the number of dendritic spines on dentate gyrus granule neurons. In addition, mating increased total dendritic length and the number of branch points of granule neurons. And their results only became stronger with time. Other studies have shown that people out of relationships for years suffer depression, lack of happiness, motivation, or goal attainment, etc. So in our own lives, loving relationships and sex create a micro-world that is gameable and allows us to succeed in pleasing other similarly temporary beings. The counter to this argument is that if sex and love were so useful, why are people having less of it over time? An article titled 7 Reasons Why Young People Are Having Less Sex tells us that people now in their early 20s are 2.5 times as likely to be abstinent as Gen Xers were at that age. 15% report having had no sex since they reached adulthood. This is also while masturbation rates have doubled for men from 1992 to 2014 and tripled for women in the same time period. And the sharpest fall in sex was among those who were married, those loving partners. What gives? As society develops and birth control, education, wealth, and density increases, people are having more simulated sex and less actual sex. And on the other hand, sex is not necessary for procreation as in vitro fertilization and surrogate birth becomes more prevalent due to falling sperm counts, which is caused by inactivity, poor diets, and low testosterone, and other very societally recent reasons. Old-fashioned sex might be becoming a legacy form of pleasure-seeking and procreation. Furthermore, the arguments for the physical purpose of sex and love assumes the world makes sense, has a purpose, and being in love or having sex means anything. Would it change anything if we just killed ourselves? Nobel Prize-winning philosopher Albert Camus famously said in The Myth of Sisyphus, one must brush aside and go straight to the real problem. One kills oneself because life is not worth living. That is certainly a truth, yet an unfruitful one because it is a truism. But does that insult to existence, that flat denial in which it is plunged, come from the fact that it has no meaning? Does its absurdity require one to escape it through hope or suicide? This is what must be clarified, hunted down, and elucidated while brushing aside all the rest? Does the absurd dictate death? The problem must be given priority over others, outside all methods of thought and all exercises of the disinterested mind. Shades of meaning, contradiction, the psychology that an objective mind can always introduce into all problems have no place in this pursuit and this passion. It calls simply for an unjust, in other words, logical thought. That is not easy. It is always easy to be logical. It is almost impossible to be logical to the bitter end. Logic to the bitter end might be trying to find what Nobel Prize winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman calls System 2 thinking, that analytical thinking, which is slower but more often right. Camus is saying that System 1 thinking, the intuitive thinking, is much easier when it comes to suicide to just slip into death because life makes no intuitive sense. But in life, there is an optimal amount of logic. Just as in sex, as in the aforementioned brain activity unique to orgasm in women and fMRI analysis, where overactivation of PFC, the prefrontal cortex, during sex makes one hyper-aware, and hyper self-awareness was strongly inversely correlated with orgasm. Similarly, there seems to be an optimal amount of thought in day-to-day terms and optimal eustress when going about life, deciding what to do within it. Sex will likely take on new meaning in deep time, the beginning of which we are barely starting to see with pornography, sex clubs, toys, robots, fetishes, rates of activity, etc. And so too will life. And more development means more options, means better personal fitting. Camus writes powerfully, a man defines himself by his make-believe as well as by his sincere impulses. There is thus a lower key of feeling, inaccessible to the heart, in the heart, but partially disclosed by the acts they imply and the attitudes of mind they assume. We each have our own microsystems of make-believe, our own personal sexual experiences, our own loving relationships. While there are physical laws of our universe, proven to a high degree of statistical certainty, and we are composed of mathematical objects patterned by simple rules, we ourselves cannot know for certain the breadth and extent of all that is. Any theory of everything will undoubtedly have its flaws. But as life started as a closed system within an arguably open system, with the simple purpose of thermodynamic work, as the primordial singularity was once a closed system within an open one, so too are love's closed, shared systems within broader open ones. Each well-meaning person deserves happiness in their own lives, whatever that means. As Nietzsche said, man is a rope stretched between the animal and the Superman, a rope over an abyss. And when you stare into the abyss stares back at you. We are a rope between the scale of sophisticated beings and simple atomic parts. It might just be that in confronting a meaningless abyss of life, the highest meaning is leaning into existence, working through the randomness, uplifting our lives, our bodies, our loved ones, not simply engaging in sex and relationships for their physical proof of increased procreation or their happiness-inducing qualities, but because they validate our existence as sentient and evolving beings. We pour ourselves into reality, into each other. Life is better with these things, wherever that takes us. And that was the essay. And I hope you enjoyed it. I wrote that one, like I said, to kind of work through some thoughts I was having. It's not the most polished essay, but I enjoyed writing it. I think that, like I said in there, we often forget that we are constituent parts of something more atomic, and that's a trip to think about. You are a democracy of cells, basically, and your DNA is basically a constitution. And if you think about it that way, and we're evolving faster and we're competing in a frontier that we have no idea. I mean, do you really have an idea where you are right now? Not just like on Earth, but where you are in the whole fabric? I mean, I don't think anybody does. And even if we look to the best 3D models that just came out a few weeks ago, you still only get a snapshot and you can only see, a portion of what lies out there. And many physicists admit that dark matter and antimatter and all the other things that we have no ability to see yet elude understanding in some ways. And so, I don't know. A lot of what we do daily is so reflexive, and the interactions we have are so we don't give thought to the uniqueness of our position and the choice that we have in all of this. And even if you don't believe in free will in the fullest sense, or you don't believe it at all, I mean, if you think about it, you are a vibrational quality, right? And so consciousness is the harmony of the dance between what you perceive and what you actuate in the world. And so I'm taking inputs and I'm talking and I'm thinking about things, and I can't control if you see the glass brain on YouTube, and I suggest you look it up. You can see that pockets of neurons firing are all over the brain in totally different areas. And so you can't really say definitely, I'd like to think about this thing and then I'm going to do this thing. But like I talked about in the essay, there is such a thing as stochastic qualities to something. And you can guide your life somewhere. You can put yourself into positions. You can't dictate what's going to happen. I mean, by the nature of the non-linear world that we live in, it is going to be, you're going to experience phase shifts. You're going to experience chaos in the mathematical sense, like Lorentz effects and stuff like that. So you can't really dictate how the world's going to go, but you can trend out certain decisions. And I mean, one of the most important decisions you can ever make in your life is to choose someone that you're going to spend it with, or people that you're going to enjoy in the temporary sense. And who knows what impact they'll have on your life. Not everything is the final thing, and not everyone is the final one, and not every job, not every class, not every so-and-so. I mean, you're constantly evolving. And people that stop evolving, I mean, you should stay away from those people, because they've forgotten the whole trend. Which in my mind, I feel like kind of after writing this essay, a little bit before, but really after, I think life's infinite. Good, bad, or whatever. And, some people say, well, you go up to heaven and you're there for an eternity and so and so. I don't think so. I mean, like, why? What's the point? So you play one game and you're done forever? I don't believe so. I don't believe that. And if you think about it, the conservation of mass and energy and a lot of other things, information, I mean, it pretty much tells you that you're going to be here forever, or you're going to be a thing forever. Because, I mean, if you really think about what we are pretty much, as Aristotle put it, substance and form. And so you can't have one without the other. You're always going to be something. And whatever you is, that concept of self, I mean, if you think about it, like, if there is a soul, and if there is a nature of you, it's not the same, and it's not translating the same. And it's like Heraclitus said, a man never steps into the same river twice, because he's never the same man, and nor is the river, something to that effect. And like Einstein said about living life, it's like a bicycle. To have balance, you have to keep pedaling. And so you're constantly evolving. And there's some sort of like calculus that demonstrates some sort of property, some function that lies beneath that change. And maybe it's like some sort of multivariate thing. Your soul is like a song or something. You put it in a certain place and the matter reacts a certain way. Or that it's completely bound in the corporeal fluid, the medium that we are in this one. Who knows? Who knows how you protrude into other realities if there is another one? But I don't know. I got thinking about like what, like why one person, or why that type of socially constructed interaction? What makes that important, useful? Why do people fall in so easily into that pathway? I don't know. I mean, like I said, you create a microcosm of something that you can understand in a world that's kind of like, I mean, if you didn't think a thought, you just walked outside and looked at everything, and you just kind of walked around the whole fucking place without ever reading a book or without, you know, learning anything beyond sight, what sense would you get of the place, you know? And if someone like magically transported you into, you know, an uninhabitable planet, but that somehow you were able to be there, I mean, what sense would you get then? And then another planet that's off of Earth. And like, then you'll start to think like, okay, this is like just a big fucking thing. And so, I don't know. You really do have to ask yourself, if life is infinite, what is not in this, what is the point, but not in the sense of like what you're doing right now, but in the sense of like what, where, why, you know? Why? Yeah. I mean, if everything keeps going forever and it's just this, there is this flux like Heraclitus talks about, where, why, who, you know? What's the point? And you know, I think it's kind of lazy to like lean back on a single deity that's like, yeah, I like this stuff, let's have more of that. Because I mean, at the end of the day, if there is omnipotence and there is omniscience and there is all this stuff about like an all-knowing, all-being, all everywhere, then what is the reason for rerunning the same show, you know? There probably wouldn't be. I don't know. I think by the nature of the existence of entropy, there is the ability for change because there's not a set outcome. And like, what would be the best reasoning for a God force? Like an orderly force? Like if God was somehow infused into the idea of like a supernal pattern or something. I don't know. Maybe that would be some kind of like, you could think about it that way. But I just, I don't know. Like if you're here in whatever situation you're in, how do you look at things if you think about an infinite world, an infinitely long, infinitely wide, infinitely deep world, which you assume with the fractal universe hypothesis? In a sense, you're mostly compounding. That's really all you're trying to do. And people kind of forget that there is that nature to the world. It is exponential. And like we saw with the explosion in Beirut, you leave some powder out, some fireworks next to it, and you start a fire, it's not going to explode at, you know, a scale factor. It's going to exponentiate, and it is going to blow up a whole central district. And that's the same thing with like the choices that you make in your life. It's like when Jesus talks about the mustard seed. Like this little thing can propagate out and become this extremely large um, fruit bearing, or rather mustard bearing bush plant. But yeah, I mean, that's tough. Yeah. I guess a cool way to look at it would be like you're living for your progeny, like you're living for your kids and your grandkids and your great grandkids. And the older we get, I mean, and the farther along this thing would play out, the longer we can live because we use our minds, and we become more able to manipulate all the matter that is out there. It's like Paul Romer, um, his big thing about economics and economic growth, rather, being dependent pretty much on innovation. And Thomas Sowell explaining that, all the matter that was on Earth before we became as sentient as we are now, it was there before. The thing that changed was our conception of how to manipulate it, how to get ore out of the ground, how to chop down trees, how to build fires, how to do all that. Like Prometheus and the story about fire. And I mean, in a sense, like I talked about, if love is the sophisticated dynamic of being attracted to something that is multi-scale, the more complicated that sentient beings get. Because I do believe that, I mean, if you think about it, the rate of evolution increases with time because things get, competition gets greater and resources and so forth. And well, I'm not sure there's convergence like E.O. Wilson talks about, but who knows? And like people talk about the singularity and stuff. Like with all this evolution, we're creating, as England points out, like we are organizing, in the true sense, our bodies more and more. So where we started out with a few organs, like we started off with just the cell membrane, and then developed spines and anuses and centralized nervous system and all kinds of things. These different packages. If we carry this forward another couple thousand, 100,000, million, billion years, what does life look like if the universe is still habitable? My goodness, And what does love look like to a future branch of whatever the human race turns into? Yeah, I mean, would love be something that something that even exists? Would they call it the same thing? I mean, if you think about it, there would be, what binds people together to want to make something new? You don't have to be like, there are more forms of love than simply a man and a woman. There's, like the whole rainbow of spectrum of expressions of sexuality, of gender, and all that. So, I mean, what's the core impulse is to create something, a relationship, a child, a society. And so, like, love is, as I argue, is exponentially distributed, and like a variation in degree at a certain point becomes a variation in kind. And so love, I think you have to, in almost a mathematical sense, you have to define it broadly enough that it can encompass things that it really does act analogous to. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see where it goes. I mean, I just think like, I guess in general, I just think, why aren't people asking that question more? And like on a really deep level, like you know that there is such a thing as, like there are these laws of nature, and they do obey, you know, geometric constraints. So you're living in a geometric world. You're living in a mechanical world in a certain sense, and not like truly mechanical where it's all like nuts and bolts, but or gears and shafts and whatnot, but that it's mechanical in the sense that it's material and things interact in consistent ways, and you can watch that play out and predict, and you know, like things are distributed in very common ways, and there's certain patterns that you see at multiple scales in different ways, and properties like replication, fractalization, harmonics. Yeah, it's interesting. And if you're curious, you should check out, there's like a plate that vibrates at certain frequencies, and the sand redistributes around the plate with each new frequency in a different pattern. And I was transfixed by that when I first saw it, probably 7 years ago. I was taking an AP biology class, and I was thinking about why it is that turtle shells take their shape, or why brains are shaped the way they are. Like, why does a biological entity, how does it know how to shape that thing, how to shape bone structure, how to shape nerves, how to shape things in consistent ways that are evolutionarily adapted? Like, I get it that it evolved towards that, but what in the I guess that's imputing consciousness into how DNA speaks. But I mean, how does a chemical series of bases know how to express a chemical, physical, you know, organic object into the form that it has, you know? And I was thinking about in terms of that plate, and I was thinking, I mean, this stuff already resonates, literally. Like sand already resonates, and cells and their component parts and all the way down resonate. And so there are effects that probably are like resonating with the thing and saying like, all right, this is the critical, and I use critical in the sense of like complexity. This is the critical shape that you can vibrate on. And yeah, I feel like love in that sense maybe is one of those, you know, like you find that person that you vibe with, and it's like, all right, I could see myself like, I could see this being a very enticing reality to be in. And in a sense, love is not so romantic, and in a sense, it is, because like Camus talks about, um, that there are stories that we tell ourselves, and Nassim Taleb talks about that there are narratives, and like people want to tell themselves narratives, and he shits on economists for that. That you know, we want to tell ourselves a nice story that, oh, we saw each other and love at first sight, and I think there is some of that, but in the other sense, there's the opposite direction in which, like, yeah, I mean, people have their optimal partner and they pick them based on certain attributes. And while there are people you can say, like, oh, that woman did this with that guy, and who would have thought? And this guy did this with that woman, who would have thought? And yeah, those are, you can bring up anecdotes, but as a trend, people choose people that are, relatively within their range and like think the same way they do and so forth. And while we are getting away from anti miscegenation laws, which is a great thing, people do that themselves. And you'll meet people that say, like, oh no, I won't date this particular thing, or they'll hide behind their culture and be like, well, my parents don't want me to marry so and so or date these types. And it's like, well, I mean, shit, if you vibe with a person, then I mean, I don't know. And that's the other thing, too. When you love somebody, you create almost a quasi family with them. And so, like, the importance of family in our society, I think, is pretty. I don't know. It's sort of constructed in the sense that, like, yeah, we're genetically related, but if I don't like you, then and you are an evil bastard, what's the point? Like, in a sense, if you have family that is so authoritarian, you become a slave to your father or mother or your brother and sister or your children. Um, you become a slave because are genetically tied to them, that you either came from or gave to this being. And in a sense, I mean, yeah, you owe them a duty. You owe a duty, or at least some sort of understanding. But in another sense, I mean, when you meet that, or when the person, whoever you're relating to, is diminishing you in a great sense for one act of giving life or whatever, receiving it, then to what extent do you owe that person your entire, like, to end your entire existence or to make it so miserable? I mean, I don't know. I feel like in the future that kind of stuff will become more open to choice. Like, people are choosing to genetically modify their kids, and I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, it is what it is. So, I don't know. In what role does love change? In what way does love change with everything becoming modified, everything becoming more synthetic, in the sense that it's created by conscious method? Yeah, from sentient beings. I mean, you can argue that there's consciousness at the subatomic level, but I mean, exponentially less. But yeah, what role does love play in that new frontier? I don't know. Like I said, entropy pervades all of this. So there is always that dance between the well-structured system one thinking and the kind of harmonic system two thinking. And you're always dancing between those two. And so, yeah, as system one becomes more of the thing that has greater role over reality, does it accentuate system two? Is it like, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, are people going to become less affectionate and more discerning? Doesn't seem like it's going that way. Like, it seems like, if anything, today we're more affectionate than we've ever been as a species. It's like that study that showed that happiness saturates at about $70,000, and that was probably 10 years ago, so it's probably closer to 100. But like, that idea that your emotions are correlated with your income or wealth or whatever to a certain point, maybe love is as well. Like, the material stability of your reality allows for you to enjoy the people in it, enjoy your role in it, enjoy it itself. In a sense, that goes back to the whole thing about the microcosm thing. How good is this microcosm that it would convince me to want to envelop that with my own emotion and kind of wire yourself with that reality in mind. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. So, anyways, let me know what you guys think. If I should do research on certain things or different topics I should consider. Um, yeah, I really, like I said, I just really want to read this because it's been on my mind again. I wrote this like 2 months ago, but yeah, I thought it was a good one to read. Who knows what the fuck place we're living in, and what the point of it is. But hey, happiness never hurt anybody. Or I shouldn't say that. I mean, it's a good thing. Happy, good relationships, good love life, good sex, good people, good vibrations. You can't really go wrong with that. So, yeah. Thanks for watching.